Do you have hip pain when you squat? Watch this.
Our next caller is LeVar from South Carolina.
LeVar, what's happening? How can we help you?
Hey, what's going on, fellas? Definitely a pleasure and honor to be here. Been a loyal listener for about 3 to 4 years, ever since you guys were interviewed by Joe DeFranco. So,
our boy.
To be on the show.
My guy.
Cool deal. All right, so what I'll do is just kind of describe my issue and give a little context of what's going on here. I guess I'll say for about the past 6 or 7 months, I've been dealing with this sharp right hip pain, kind of around my hip flexor area. I've really been focusing on increasing my depth and range of motion in my squats. So I really feel it more on the days where I do any type of squat or lunge variation. The thing is, I don't feel it while I'm performing the movement per se, but it's typically about an hour or two. I'm sitting down, I have a desk job. So if I go to stand, then I'll just have this sharp pain, which will stop me in my tracks. I may feel it for about 30 seconds to a minute before I kind of am able to move without limping or get around normal. So I guess my question is, do you guys think I'm trying to push too much from a depth standpoint, and or should it be more I'm doing from a mobility standpoint? I do use MAPS Prime before I do all my movements. I actually about 2 years ago went on a mobility kit, kind of like Adam did back in the day, where I just tried to focus on like my hip mobility, ankle, shoulder mobility, and all that good stuff. I'm really trying to work on the load aspect, specifically with my barbell squat. So I'm wondering if that could be the main factor of why I'm feeling this pain.
I love this question.
Yeah, obviously the depth is an issue, but the real issue is why. Right? Why is the depth of the squat
there's
an
a
issue?
disconnect there.
You know, it's weird, LeVar. This is often not the case, but I've now encountered a few situations where this was the case, and it was with people who were kind of troubleshooting hip pain when they were doing a squat. These are people who are fit. They're doing, hip mobility movements. They're working on abduction. They're doing all this other stuff. They can't figure out what's going on. And then what they figured out was what usually isn't the issue with most people, but with these people, it was weak hip flexors.
Hip flexors, yes, thank you.
Which you almost never have anybody tell you, strengthen your hip flexor.
Right.
It's almost always hip flexors are too tight.
Let's stretch it. Yeah, it's like too tight on you because you're sitting all the time, but you're probably just weak there.
Yeah, I would do like a simple exercise would be lay on your back, both legs out straight, keep one leg on the ground, and then do a single leg raise.
Incorporate hip thrust.
Well, that would be glutes.
Incorporate hip thrust. Yeah, but you'll get hip flexor in there too, though.
Yeah.
You'll definitely get that. Loaded on the bar like that with emphasizing the squeeze at the top, you'll absolutely get that.
That'll be glute, but I'm talking about the front. Like we're looking at working the anterior part of the hip. So like a single leg raise or a knee raise.
Knee raise, yeah. I like the hanging knee raise too, and they have this monkey foot. I forget where you can attach. Yeah, like a dumbbell to your ankle, and you do those leg raises like one at a time while hanging.
Yeah, so I would try doing some single leg raises or knee raises before you squat. See if you notice a difference. See if it actually helps.
I also think MAP symmetry for you.
That's the other thing.
Like,
unilateral stuff was.
We're going to send you MAP symmetry because I would for sure. Honestly, all I would do because I would be. I hate doing the little tedious shit like that, So if you can, you discipline yourself to do it, then fine. I honestly think if you just added barbell hip thrust in there with MAP symmetry, I guarantee you're going to see a difference. Well, keep doing what you're doing with the mobility stuff, and you add those things, and I bet you he would see a difference.
Well, what are you doing now for your? You said in your written question that you're doing hip mobility. So what are you doing? Are you doing hip thrust, and what else are you doing?
Yeah, so I'm actually about to starting next week on phase 3 of MAPS Performance. So I'm doing all the mobility stuff that's there, and then I use everything from MAPS Prime to Prime.
Yeah. So again, I'm guessing, but I feel pretty confident that it's your hip flexors because I know what hip mobility looks like. I know what the exercises look like in our programs, and rarely do we put any targeted hip flexor work, mainly because it's usually an issue for people. But somebody who's fit, like you, literally, there's been 3 people now that I've talked to.
I had this similar problem, so that's why that's something I did to strengthen it. It really made a big impact. Which I was doing all the mobility for it. I was doing the 90-90s. I was doing the the kneeling hip flexor stretches, thinking it was a tightness issue, but it was a strength issue.
Yeah. So I try it before you do your next workout, and it may sound tedious and small. But you'll know if your hip flexor's weak. You'll try it and be like, oh, wow, that doesn't feel right. That feels kind of strange and not so strong. And get them to activate a little bit and then try your squats and then see if you feel the same the next day. And then with MAP symmetry, just because it's unilateral, it naturally will open up and highlight any imbalances or weaknesses that you may have. I'm assuming this is one hip and not both.
Yeah, no, it's my right hip. Yeah.
There also could be a slight asymmetrical shift at the bottom of your squat because it only comes out when you load it really heavy. So this is also a possibility.
Yeah.
So I would take a video of myself from the front, side, and back, and I would really pay attention at the bottom of that squat if you see this slight shift to one side or the other. And normally there's some sort of a breakdown in the feet first. So I had the same issue. Mine wasn't hip flexor. Mine was that one side my foot was slightly pronating more on one side than the other, which was causing me to shift my hips at the bottom of my deep squat just a tiny bit. And that little bit of a shift just overworked that one side. And then it, just like you, I wouldn't feel it during the workout. I'd feel it like the next day, and it felt like someone was sticking a knife in my fucking hip.
Yeah.
And it was all related to my foot. It was actually related to my foot, and then the shift in my hips at the bottom of the squat. So that also could be it too.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes me feel better because it was getting a little frustrating because I feel like I'm doing everything from a mobility standpoint. So the fact that you guys have experienced it yourself, you're hitting the nail on the head with exactly how I'm feeling. So
yeah. To Adam's point too, like any sort of like rotation with that. One way to address that is a single leg deadlift, and to do that, you really want to pay attention to your foot, whether or not it starts to rotate at all on you, and to be able to. The whole intent of that exercise is to make sure that everything stays completely straight, and if it doesn't, then you stop, and then you keep at it, so that way you can build and pattern that correctly.
This is why I love Map Symmetry for this right now. I think Map Symmetry, because it's all unilateral work in there, so I think that's going to really benefit you. But if it's not one, it's going to be the other. The two things that we're talking about, 99% of the time, it's one of those two things. The hip flexor thing, I think, is way less common. But
it's so frustrating. It's like you'll get somebody who's fit, like Justin. I remember you doing this. Like he couldn't figure it out. And then I don't remember who I talked to. It was that trainer that we know. I can't remember his name right now. Real smart guy, can deadlift a ton of weight. Good friend of ours. I can't. His name slips right now, but he told me, "Oh man, I had the same thing. It was my hip flexor." I told Justin, and Justin was like, "Huh, I wonder." And you went out and did some stuff for your hip flexors.
Marlon, right?
Yes, there you go.
Marlon.
Yeah, Marlon.
Yeah.
So, that's it.
Cool. So can I follow up with two quick program questions real quick?
Yep.
So for performance, considering all the issues that, the remedies for my issues, should I still try to focus on load in movements, or should I kind of just bring the weight down, focus on the technique and getting it to feel better first? Or you think as long as I do like the proper priming and the moves that you recommend, I should be fine to still try to push the load?
I mean, I would lighten the load, but I also like the idea of somewhat challenging it every once in a while to see if you're making improvements. So like when I'm troubleshooting something like this, I back off the load a little bit, I put in the work on the things that we're talking about, and then I kind of challenge it again, see if the problem arises again. So you're kind of going back and forth, right? So I would say come back on the load, focus on the things that we're talking about with the feet and the hips and the stability and all those things. You're going to go to symmetry right away. I'd want you to go right into symmetry, start training that, and follow it how it's laid out. And a lot of that isn't focused on really loading, but it's okay to kind of load every once in a while to see if that you have that breakdown every time you load, because that tells you like, okay, I'm not fixing the problem, it's still there. Hopefully you can start to progress the load and you start to see that it's getting less and less or goes away completely.
Perfect. All right. And you actually just answered my next question, because I was following, the intent was to follow RGB as laid out. So I was going to ask, when should I work in symmetry? So I'll go into that right after.
Right away.
Yeah, go right to symmetry.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Perfect. Thank you so much.
You got it.
Big help.
All right.
You got it, man. Thanks for calling in.
All right. Awesome. Yep. Thank you.
You got it. Yeah, it's boy, this is something that was recent, where it was Marlon. It was Marlon, and he's like, man, I had weak hip flexors, and this is a guy who's fit, strong, pulls over 600 pounds.
Yeah.
He's like, I couldn't figure out why the hell my hip felt impinged, and it's because 9 out of 10 times it's not that.
Yeah.
9 out of 10 times you have someone do that, it gets worse. So
I wouldn't even
really
have thought
weird
to go in that direction, which is crazy, because again, like from the mobility side in the background, I saw how that really transformed like the way I could move, and then so I'm like, it has to be a mobility issue.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, I just was lacking strength.
Wasn't it him who also said that he started to incorporate the hip thrust and then he noticed he didn't have any problems with it?
I don't know if that had to do
he
with that.
incorporated for sure.
Yeah, I know he
I don't know
started
if he
to hip
attributed
thrust
to
a lot
that.
after that because he wasn't doing any hip thrust, and then he started to hip thrust after that whole issue happened, and then I thought that was enough for him to not have that problem anymore.
Yeah, no, he was doing like
Well, especially if you hold at the top, you have isometric component to that. You know, you can get some good strength there.
yeah, but he was doing. I think it started with like single leg knee raises and like those little things. You
Yeah.
know, just kind of connect. But yeah, it is interesting. It's really frustrating when you feel like you're doing everything. It's not frustrating when you're doing nothing.
Yeah.
Because then you're like, well, I guess I know why I hurt. But when you're doing everything, boy, you start to have to become Sherlock Holmes trying to figure out.
Yeah, I really feel like it's going to be one or the other. Or those two things that we
Yeah,
just
same.
said. It's more likely one of those.